have to press it? No?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we'll get started here. Welcome to the Architectural Review Board hearing of Thursday, July 3rd. Could I have the secretary call roll?
Chair Liebert, Vice Chair Alto.
Here.
Board Member Luke.
Present.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Present.
Board Member Goyer.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Chair Lippert is out today, and so I'll be acting as chair for today. Now is the time when we open the oral communications, and members of the public may speak to any item not on the agenda. We have 3 minutes per speaker. If you have a speaker card, if you could bring that up to me, that would be great. And if you don't mind using the handheld mic today, or you can put it in the stand if you need to have your hands free.
This is on something that's
I'm sorry, just one moment. So this is Mark Weiss, and again, Mark, you'll have, let me just get a little timer going here.
You're saying it's a subcommittee item, so maybe we should.
Gateway is, it says it comes after adjournment, so this is the time to speak. I want to ask.
There is?
No, I think we normally we would have you come and meet with us at the subcommittee session, but you can speak now, yes.
It's sort of poetic.
Okay.
All right, Mark, give me just 1 second here. We don't have our typical timer and things in here, and so I'm just going to set a quick timer and get myself organized about that. Just 1 moment, please. All right, go ahead, thank you.
It's called GoDaddy Dorado. Grocery outlet, a Berkeley-based chain, actually controlled by a hedge fund, going public, I read, for $1 billion. We gave them an oversized sign on Alma. GoDaddy, a website, one of whose biggest investors is a $6 billion hedge fund, here in Palo Alto, an office overlooking Litton Plaza, incidentally has the same landlord as Grocery Outlet, whether he is in on it or not, going public for $1 billion. SurveyMonkey, chief tenant at Litton Gateway, different developer, whether he is in on it or not, has borrowed $800 billion to pay back early investors, but pundits say it is going public for $1 billion. How many times will someone get lost looking for that oversized building on the corner of Litton and Alma? These signs do not face north, east, south, or west. They face Wall Street / Sand Hill Road. They face Rick Kimball, Scott Sandell, Jeff Crow, Roger McNamee, Nick Storiali, David Hornick, Tim Draper, Bill Draper's cute little grandson, Teddy, in the movies. Although they are outdoor advertising, they are also arguably business-to-business plays. They are designed to help the finance community reap outrageous sums of money in an arguably underregulated market. We the people, with a $150 billion civic budget, a fraction of that to regulate the industry, real estate development not too big to fail finance schemes, are not even the Fay Ray to their King Kongs. We are the nits in Fay Ray's hair. We are literally nitwits. We say, with due respect, at least the joints match up, tongue and groove and all that. We like their faux neocolonialism. It's a tribute to Portola, who came here in 1769 looking for Monterey, but found some twin redwoods. Dos Altos, Los Palos, Palos Altos, whatever sells. Eureka, we finally found El Dorado. That's a Rem cool house, but there are mice in the Vandero. Frank God. GoDaddy. Whole lot of love. Jobless. Babylon. Thanks.
Sorry, I have minutes from June 5th and June 19th. Do we have any comments or changes, or can I have a motion?
I apologize. I didn't review the minutes. I didn't see the copies in my packet, so I didn't look at them.
I think they were emailed out, I believe, yesterday.
That's why I didn't see them.
And I'm happy to move that we approve the minutes of June 5th as submitted. I wasn't here for the 19th.
I'll move we approve the minutes on June 19th as submitted.
All right, and I'll second both of those motions. Do we, let's go ahead and have our vote. All those in favor? Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to take one at a time? All right, so, thank you. I will move that we second the motion made by Board Member Malone Pritchard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's,
And I'll abstain.
let's see, that passes 3-0-1-1. And then I'll move that we, I'll second the motion made by Board Member Gouillet. And let's vote on that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye.
Oh.
Oh.
I was going to abstain too, so we
All right,
can't.
so we can't do that one. We will, I guess, continue postpone that item until the next hearing. All right. And with that, just again, briefly for anyone who's just joined us, I just want to make sure everyone understands that the 385 Sherman item has been continued to the regular meeting of July 17th. So if you're here for that item, please be aware of that. We have 2 study session items today, and we will begin with Highway 101 Adobe Pedestrian Bicycle Overcrossing Project. And this is a request by Public Works Engineering for a study session on the proposed design guideline prepared for the new pedestrian bicycle overcrossing at Adobe Creek over Highway 101. The design guideline would be used as part of the design competition for the bridge. And I think we have some folks here for a presentation. Great, let's do that, and we'll start with 10 minutes.
Good morning. Can
Could
you
you
hear, is this on?
I don't think so. If you just introduce yourself and...
I'm Elizabeth Ames. Sorry about that. So I'm going to hand this over to Casey, and we can kind of go over the design guidelines. But we would like your feedback on potentially what vision do you want us have us kind of develop the goal of the like a vision statement would be. Any unique design features, we're looking for that because that can help tie into this vision statement. And of course, we're going to work with AIA, assuming we get a contract with them in August. We'll finalize that statement and the guidelines before it gets published or finalized. So with that, I will turn it over to Casey.
Thank you. Morning. So just a bit of background, kind of orient yourselves if you're not familiar with the project in detail. You know, an overcrossing of 101 along with about a 0.1 mile reach trail along the Water District Maintenance Road to connect really into the bicycle network in Palo Alto. So a lot of work's been done to identify this location, just overcrossing versus undercrossing. You know, a lot of success in getting this project funded quickly. You know, we were here presenting to you last year talking mostly about the environmental approach, particularly the visual impact statement. We can talk about that. And then since that time, we've formally brought in the trail as part of the project. So as Liz mentioned, you know, sort of 3 key aspects: wanting your feedback, the goal statement. You know, we're kind of, I think, currently calling them goals in the design guidelines. I would probably say they're more objectives, and so we kind of want what's the overarching goal statement, help bring some magic and motivation to the project before, as it goes out to the competition, and then the process itself. So here is sort of how the current design guideline contents are laid out, with those goals, objectives, you know, trying to give sort of an overview after giving some background, and then we have sort of a visual tour based on just some sort of 3-dimensional graphics, trying to keep them at somewhat a sketchy level, not getting too much into the details of the design itself. And then, you know, lots of reference documents. We have, you know, have done a lot of work environmentally. That's actually been driving a lot of our schedule and some key aspects of the project that we can talk about. But in general, the guidelines will say, you know, we have this envelope of a footprint, and, you know, all the competition designs should conform to that footprint. So first, what's an appropriate goal statement? Here's sort of our draft take. This is actually not yet in the design guidelines, but you know, landmark bridge and gateway into Silicon Valley and the Palo Alto Baylands, serving transportation and recreation needs for the community. You know, I'm not going to read these verbatim. These are sort of the 8 design objectives, but generally speaking, you know, keeping it functional, you know, very focus on function for the user. You know, meeting applicable standards and guidelines. You know, incorporating a lot of habitat restoration. There's about 1.3 acres of the Baylands that we've identified that's not critically sensitive in terms of it's not a wetland. It doesn't. There's no existing presence of endangered species, and it's got a lot of sort of non-native invasive trees and shrubs. So really, I think, you know, one of the key aspects is sort of marrying the design of the landscape with the structure itself as a really key design objective. So again, here's sort of the overarching overview graphic. For the Baylands portion, we did study the sort of the maximum sort of impact. So we looked at a reinforced soil slope or a mechanically stabilized earth embankment, really just to try and understand what that footprint would be, what are the geologic issues or geotechnical issues in terms of it is bay mud, so the weight will settle everything on that side. So we really tried to understand what are the technical constraints. As we move into the competition, you know, that might become a much different design, and clearly that's a key opportunity area for the overall project. On the west side, or sort of the bottom part of this graphic, near the confluence of Barron and Adobe Creeks, we have a lot more technical constraints, just because we do not want to get into the creek. Creates more delay for the project, more permitting requirements, and so that alignment is relatively set or locked in. There is, you know, there are some constructability sort of guidance in terms of a precast structure, because otherwise we would be introducing work within the creek. And then, but there is a, you know, portion of the 3600 West Bayshore Road property that we are utilizing for, you know, ramping up, providing, but potentially providing a secondary stairway or access point for folks from West Bayshore Road. That property was recently purchased by Google in 2013, and they also purchased a number of properties just to the bottom of this graphic across the creek confluence area in East Meadows Circle. So, you know, the possibility of a future potential connection into that development, whatever that is, not being studied as part of our environmental process, but could be yet another consideration for design competitors to keep that design flexible for future potential connections. And then we have a lot of just technical constraints. We are assuming a concrete box girder bridge with a center column in the highway median, but again, just for environmental purposes to understand what's the most impact the project would need to address. There would be financial constraints with looking at a signature span going over clean over 101, but clearly in the goals that comes out is if you can make that work and make it financially feasible and meet the other goals, we certainly would encourage that. The guidelines go through a number of sort of common design features. I'm going to kind of skip over this. We can come back to it in Q&A if you have any questions. But really just what are the key elements, laying out just the requirements for those. But in terms of unique features, I talked about sort of the integration between the landscape and the structure. We kind of keep that as just a really high level guidance. Don't get too specific. There probably the area where there's the most amount of tweaks available and creative energy can be going into the Baylands. But we don't really call out specific items. Public art is on the checklist, but we don't really say much about it. We talk about this, potential viewing deck as part of helping, with the overall, integration with the Baylands. You can see in this image in the horizon there is Bixby Park, so some kind of dialogue with that area is a potential. But again, we don't really have a lot to say outside of the common design features. So other possibilities could be, we talk about the bridge as a frame for the Baylands. The Baylands guidance, we include that, we reference that. It really does emphasize horizontality, really just keeping the sky and the land as the key element. So maybe we put in some additional guidance on focusing underneath the bridge deck. But again, we didn't want to get too prescriptive. Want to hear feedback from you. And then here's a bit more about the competition. You have that in your packet as well, along with this this flow chart, which we can talk about. So those are the three elements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will open the public comment period for this item. I don't have any speaker cards at this point, so if this is something that you'd like to speak about, go ahead and why don't you come on up and you can fill out a card later. If you would just introduce yourself, please. And I think Diana has the mic. There we go.
I'm Shani Kleinhaus. I'm with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I'll be talking to you later. I participated in the initial discussions about where and how the bridge is going to get through. And one of the comments that Audubon made is that whatever is chosen, be careful of using glass or anything that the birds would collide into. Bridges are considered one of the things that birds can collide into. The placement of this is critical because it's right in the Baylands, and there are a lot of birds that fly through into those trees. I don't know if those trees will remain there, but in general by the creek. So please beware of that issue.
Thank you, Shani. Any other card? If you could just fill out a card and bring it up so we have record of that. And if there's anyone else here to speak to this item, I'll just leave the public comment period open for this item, and we can move on, I guess, to board discussion. So, Board Member Guyer, would you like to start us off?
Actually, I liked all the points that have, but to me, it's a little early to start making any, concepts as far as what I think it should look like. I mean, I usually don't want to be too overly aggressive on the requirements, mainly because all it does is limit a designer's ability to come up with something that we may not have thought of. And that's something we need to be very careful of. I guess the only question I have is that, and being a member of the AIA, is it really necessary to, I think, it's all fine to say we want an international architect to, but I'm sorry, but I don't see somebody, of that fame coming to design a pedestrian overcrossing in Palo Alto. I just don't see it. I'd rather see there are plenty of competent local architects between San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, or even the East Bay. I'd like to see it limited to that and maybe bring those 4 chapters in and not go to the state level. I mean, I guess it's the old, there are plenty of competent people here. I don't think there's a need for a Los Angeles architect to come up here and design the facility.
Board Member Liu.
So, thank you for your presentation, and I think most of the comments that I had in my mind about this, I think you've already addressed in the packet, and I think that generally everything is looking good. With regard to the mission statement, I was wondering, like in the language that you have, like you mentioned things like the site history, and you mentioned things like like recreation in there, and I was wondering if we should elaborate on that. I mean, I think that Palo Alto has been sort of in the leadership position on the Baylands area, and I was wondering if we should sort of emphasize that. Like, we don't have movie theaters and strip malls and stuff like that. We didn't fill in the Bay on purpose, and so I was wondering if we should just sort of emphasize that history of that it is that we kept it as open space. And just to emphasize that is, that's fairly distinct compared to the other cities on the peninsula. I think the other thing too that I might emphasize is like the San Francisco Bay Trail. So I mean, I think we all know like its main intent, but like an outside designer may not understand the regional significance of it. And really, we're ringing all around the bay and trying to ring all around the ridge, and that we have spokes in between the Bay Trail and the Ridge Trail, and this is like a critical piece to fill in that gap. And so it's not just one little overcrossing; it's part of a much bigger picture, and you can see that in the Bay Trail maps. On the ABAG website, you can actually see the big picture of all of that, and it's really pretty impressive, like when you see the work that's been done and the progress that's being made on that. And it's really just to me, in my mind, this is like a critical piece in Palo Alto because we don't really have a great crossing over the freeway. And if you look at the cities that do, they have much higher use. People are using, like in San Mateo, Foster City, whatnot, you'll see so many more people out in the Baylands than you do in Palo Alto, because they don't have to drive; they just go, and a lot of the cities have 2 or 3 crossings over the freeway, and we just have this one substandard one. So, so I think that's all of my comments. I think everything is looking good. I don't have a personal preference on the different aesthetics. I know on last time you came, we had different ideas about that. To me, the point of the competition is just to let it be open, and we'll be surprised at what we see. And I think that's the point. That's the point of having the competition. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Board Member Malone-Pritchard.
I agree fully with the comments of my colleagues. As far as the mission statement, I think key items for me are the landscape integration, both with the creek and with the Baylands. I think that's an important feature. And the linkage to the Bay Trail and the regional importance of this, I think, is something that should be really emphasized. As far as design features, I really wouldn't want to be prescriptive about anything. As Alex said, you want to make it open, and I look forward to being surprised by what creative designers come up with. Just had a little bit of a comment on the project schedule. I went through that, and it seems as though the time allowed for the design teams to actually do their work is very short. The city's got months and months in here, and you've got a couple of weeks for people to throw together a design. So I urge you to take a look at that and allow sufficient time for people to design, because if you don't have enough time in the schedule, people may not propose on it.
Thank you. Did you have a suggestion for what might be an appropriate time frame?
More than a month.
All right, thank you. All right, I will just agree with the comments made by the other board members here. I think that what's already been said is really appropriate. I think the comments made by Shani about the caution for birds is something that we might want to incorporate into the document in some way. I wanted to ask a quick question. In the tentative project schedule, you're talking about developing a list of firms. Are you pre-qualifying, or are you selecting a list of firms before, or is this just an open competition and anyone can participate?
That's a very good question. So we're thinking of doing a qualification-based competition. So we were the idea was to have designed and constructed 2 bridges in the last 10 years. That was what we were hoping for, and that essentially could be about, we're thinking 20 firms, architectural or engineering firms. It's an AE type firm, right? We got the civil or the structural and the architectural. So we're thinking a combination of those firms would be about 20. And maybe it's not so much international. I know I was, saying that, but the California Council is really good at marketing as well, on the national and also local scale. They have a lot of resources, and so that was another reason to kind of go with them and recruit or advertise to get those type of firms that have had that experience, because there might be a lot of those, or they're thinking about 20. AIA is saying that.
Okay. So that's actually a concern for me, is that limits the potential for local firms, architects, engineers to get involved in this project, because the number of bridges that get built, particularly in this area locally, wouldn't really permit their participation. There are going to be so few that have the ability to meet that qualification that I think you're only going to be looking at people from out of the area, out of state, and I would really encourage you to rethink that aspect of this. I think the whole point of this competition, and what this board discussed when we first met about this, was to create an event that would provide some great ideas and some amazing concepts, and that the process would be iterative after that, that you would take these ideas, that you would then select, maybe even combine a few of them together and move forward. But the goal here is not to end up with, from my perspective, the goal was not to end up with a solution, but to end up with a concept that then you would secure someone to take forward into a design and physical solution. And so developing a list of firms, soliciting proposals from that small group is really counter to what I had expected this process to be. And I'm hopeful that you won't do it that way, because I think that it will change how this community perceives the process. I think trying to be inclusive about this and get people from the area involved who have local knowledge, things like what Board Member Liu is bringing up here about the Bay Trail, things like that. Those are really important items, and I'd like to make sure that that gets included in this process. I did want to just briefly ask, as Casey was talking, he was describing some recent changes in the ownership of the buildings in the East Meadow Circle and East Meadow Drive area. And I wanted to just, I know to get to those buildings, you need to sort of go up the path a ways and then back down the path a ways. Is there any connection that is proposed or considered for crossing Barron Creek or Adobe Creek that you're aware of? I haven't ridden that trail myself in a very long time, and so I can't remember how you get across the creek there.
Well, currently you can't.
Right?
You have to.
Yeah.
And the circulation was a big part of our initial environmental scoping meeting we had almost 2 years ago now. So that's why we incorporated the trail, because it was a critical piece of the overall project. So right now you have to access the underpass via West Bay Shore, Fabian Way. So with that reach trail, you'll actually be able to get to Meadow Drive. So if you're on Lewis, for example, you can connect in from there. There is not, we looked at that as part of our initial refining the options, the alignment alternatives. The site is very constrained. You have very high tension overhead utilities. You have vertical and horizontal maintenance clearance requirements for the water district. And so going over Barron Creek and landing in East Meadow Circle is feasible, but really only when there's a the development pattern and sort of what happens in East Meadow Circle is critical, just because of the ramp will have to really go into that property. We've been coordinating with Google a little bit on this. They are very keenly aware and interested in this project. They want to see it happen quickly. Their architect is aware of where we are in the process and is, I think, waiting to respond to where the design goes, or at least have the alignment stabilized through the environmental process. So again, I think we've tried to design it such that an extension is logical and could be just would not require any modifications to the bridge itself beyond the extension.
So just a spur essentially that might
A
come
spur,
off of that.
yeah.
Okay, great. That's great.
Because otherwise, we're going to introduce a lot more environmental impacts, and we looked at that, and they were just quite complicated.
Makes sense, but I do think including a component about that would be really helpful, because I think that there's an intensity of people and activity that happens in that circle, and having a connection there would be, I think, very beneficial. That's all I had. Board members have additional comments?
Well, I mean, I do like, I agree with the comments that limiting it to a firm that has architectural and engineering. I mean, there are plenty of very competent engineers out there that if an architectural firm came up with a good design, they could hire a structural engineering firm to build it or to hold it up or that sort of thing. So I think we're limiting it if we're, as you said, I agree completely. If we're looking for that size firm, there may be one in the area, or two. You're going to end up with some of the big names out of either New York or the Midwest, Chicago, that sort of thing. And I don't really want to see those firms doing that. They're not related to this area. They don't understand the area. It's a whole different mindset. I'd rather have a local firm.
Board Member Liu.
I have Elizabeth? Yes.
Well, thank you for the comments. This is what we want to hear, like what your opinion is on how we could finesse the design competition. The only other reason why we were coming up with this kind of a qualification-based process was we've got to deal with these grant deadlines. We have to build over the freeway, and we didn't want any kind of design issue to come up where we're delayed. But there's probably a lot of local people that can handle a job like this. It's just that's our concern, so thank you. And I also wanted to bring up the process, the competition process. We've got the flow chart in there. I hope you kind of understood how that was going to happen. But the only tricky part that we're trying to figure out is that the jury would be potentially, I don't know how many, it might be like 4 or 5 jurists, and then we would have an ARB subcommittee that would be part of this process where the firms would be shortlisted. They would then get a stipend of, say, $20,000 each. They would do the design concept, say this concept takes a month, bring that back, and it would be like an interview in front of the jury and maybe the ARB subcommittee. This was something I was hoping to kind of vet with you. And the audience would be present, but they wouldn't be coming up. It wouldn't be like oral communications. They would just be witnessing this process. So you guys would be asking questions. The jury would be asking questions. Then the jury would go back, just like in a courtroom, I guess, and they would deliberate and take your feedback. And there's also public feedback that we would get through other means, like through the website and comments ahead of that interview process. So the jury would then make an informed decision, and of course using their expertise and listening to the firms, they would decide, and then that decision would go back to the ARB in a public meeting. So hopefully you kind of understood that flow chart.
Can I make one comment? Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't want this to be, every Tom, Dick, and Harry can submit a design. I still think they need to be pre-qualified. But there's a big difference between, a single architect who got their license 3 weeks ago versus a firm that's, has done, nice work and has the ability and the experience to do it. So, I mean, just because I don't think it needs to be an AE firm doesn't mean they shouldn't be qualified.
All right, Board Member Liu.
I have just a detailed question for Casey. So, I've read some criticisms about some of the existing bicycle bridges that cross 101, which is sort of the touchdown. Like, they build this nice bridge, but then once you're down, there's no way to cross, like, the East Bay Shore or whatnot, and that's just sort of left hanging, just sort of left unfinished. And I was wondering what provisions could be made for that. And I'm saying just that there are some bicyclists who will stay on the trails, but others who really just want to be in the bicycle lane and they don't want to be, on the path. And so, so I was wondering if any consideration had been given to that. And then also, I think the last time you came, you mentioned that I think on the West Bay Shore side that you were thinking about a staircase because you couldn't make the ramp handicapped. Maybe it may not be possible to make the ramp handicapped accessible, and I was wondering if that is still a constraint.
So your first question about bicycle access. So we tried to sort of pre-mitigate some of that with the alignment itself. So we looked at where it was going to touch down in relationship to the San Francisco Bay Trail. Where it touches down, we're hoping one that we'll be leveling off and dropping down to the same level of the Bay Trail, off of the Bay Trail, such that there can be a little bit of friction happening off of this picture that you're seeing here to the right. Frankly, if you do observe East Bay Shore, very few folks actually use the bike lanes. If they are, they're riding in the wrong way. They don't. The bike lane that's tucked up adjacent to the highway is extremely underutilized. And so I think connecting into the Bay Trail is paramount. From there, you can cross Adobe Creek via an existing bridge and access the street right from there. So it's not that you couldn't get out to the street very quickly, but you just utilize existing infrastructure. And we have created the environmental footprint such that if there was to be minor modifications, removal of those bollards that are kind of clumsy there, you could do that as part of the project. It wouldn't introduce new impacts. On West Bay Shore, because we want to provide a nice walkable environment to the bridge as well, and over the creek, providing ADA access, we are proposing to actually remove the bike lane at least in one direction, because we need that space. Otherwise, we need to widen another bridge over the creek. So the removal of the southbound bike lane is proposed. We would mitigate that with new signage, new striping for a shared lane for a while. And then there's the existing ramp. As you came down the bridge, you'd be able to either then go onto the street network, or you could turn in a different direction and go onto that reach trail. So in both locations, you have options to go onto the street. And we've done, I think, a good job to identify the right connections. There might be really minor things that you could do to make those better. But I think we've done a pretty good job, and the options are pretty limited. In terms of the ADA access for the stairway, we did recently modify our tentative preferred alignment because of when Google purchased the property. We were able to sort of utilize. We were going to move that driveway and create a larger space. The ADA would still suffice. You'd be able to then, with the sidewalk, you'd be able to go access the touchdown point. But if you wanted to quickly get off the bridge or get on the bridge, you'd have the stairs as an option. In the design competition, I think, we do talk about stairs or a ramp. There's a potential you could find enough space to ramp down. We didn't explore that in detail, but I think it would be challenging. You'd eat up a lot of that site, but it's definitely not out of the question. And I think that's, it's an open challenge to the competitors.
One last question was at the last meeting you also mentioned there was a constraint with it's like overhead utility or telecom or something, and is that still an issue?
Generally we've that was just more for us to figure out the initial alignments and opportunities. You have to be a certain amount under they're very high tension overhead utilities. You touch those and you're doubling your project cost. So I think unless folks are proposing some really radical vertical elements, we have sufficient room and clearance based on our alignment.
Great, thank you.
Board Member Malone Pritchard.
Just a couple of things. Elizabeth, when you described the jury process and specifically weren't going to be allowing public comment as part of that at the actual hearing, I'm wondering whether that's the right direction to go. Palo Alto has a very robust public engagement process, and I don't see any harm in allowing members of the public to comment during that. So I would urge you to look at including that, because some people would rather come and speak at a hearing than write an email or do something from a website. And then just one more thing on bringing architects from out of the area and out of state potentially. CEQA is a really big deal, and we're the only people who have it. So if you bring in architects from out of state, you'll have to bring them up to speed on that, and it takes years to understand how CEQA works.
All right, so I want to just emphasize the comment made by Board Member Malone Pritchard about community involvement and making sure that we do get everyone's voices involved here and included. You know, I'm hearing what we're saying here, and I'm looking at the flow chart of the process, and I really want to just reiterate. I know I'm sort of beating this to death here a little bit, but I think what you really need to do in this process, even in regard to CEQA and all these other things, is open this competition to anybody who is interested in providing ideas. Palo Alto is a community that is built on international ideas. We're at the forefront of technology. We are leaders in so many ways, and to constrain something like this seems to me so counter to that. You know, I think about a town like Columbus, Indiana. If you haven't seen that, it's this incredible little enclave where there was a family that was very successful in the printing business. They left a huge amount of money to the city or to the town and said, for all of your major buildings, bring in fantastic architects and build something incredible. When you walk around there, it's like walking through a museum. You know, there's every big name all over the world, and many of them local, are represented there, and it's fascinating. And I think that the opportunity to include anyone in this process at the idea stage is so important. And then use your selection process to, you know, request qualifications from architects and engineers or A&E firms. Pre-select a group that would take those ideas, then work with that design group to develop it into something that is real and possible and meets the budget and all the requirements, and they can work efficiently and they know all the regulations and they can get it done. But to stifle the idea portion of this seems to me very counter to what we were setting out to do. That's really all I have. Any closing comments from anyone? Great. Well, thank you very much for this. Very excited to see this moving forward. I think this will be a really fun process to watch it unfold, and look forward to where this goes. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so with that, I think Diana is switching us over here. We have a second study session item, which is titled Bird-Friendly Building Design, and we have a presentation by environmental advocate Shani Kleinhaus of the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society regarding bird-friendly building design. I think we're just getting her presentation open here, and once we get that.
While I'm coming up, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Gil Fred. I'm the city's chief sustainability officer. I'm kind of pleasure being all directly.
All right.
Glad to do that. I've had some conversations with Shani about this issue, talked with our development services director, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity for you all to get the informational briefing on some of the new findings around the issues of bird-friendly design, and particularly the best practices both in terms of architectural design and policy that's emerging in other cities for our consideration.
Great.
So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm unfortunately for meeting the city manager, but I'll turn it over.
Thank you for joining us. All right, so I think Diana's got your presentation up here, Shanice. So once you're ready, we'll give you 10 minutes today. Thank you. Yeah, we can do 10 minutes if you don't mind, and then through the question and answer process, I'm sure we can resolve any of the items that we didn't touch on in your presentation.
So there is a lot. Sorry, okay. So the birds, they fly at night, they migrate at night, and they attracted to light. And so often they'll end up in a place where there is no food for them. They wake up in the morning, they need to refuel to continue flying, and they can't find any food, or they can get trapped in light plumes. This is the little specks there are birds captured in the 9/11 memorial, and they have to turn it off every now and then to let the birds out because they can't see their way into the dark, and they get trapped. So many CEQA documents would tell you not to have lights that are to shield the lights, and this is why. Bird and buildings collisions in the United States are estimated at between 365 and 1 billion birds that are killed every year by collisions with buildings. That's a lot of birds. And there's mostly, well, kind of relevant to the number of housing. It's low buildings and residences, and then some in high-rises, but mostly it's because there are fewer high-rises. I just wanted to give you a few examples. This is downtown San Jose. It's the Fairmont Hotel, and you see in the background over there the passageway. And this is what a bird looks like after it hit that passageway. Every week they have to clean at least one. This is not a good place for birds. So how do you make birds see that there is glass? What do you do about it? So the American Bird Conservancy has started doing collision studies. They have a tunnel, they fly birds, and they have different kinds of glass treatments to see which side the bird chooses to fly. They can choose to fly to an area that is clear or an area that has a certain kind of glass, reflective or otherwise. And they have measures that essentially show that birds need to have dimensions that they think they can't fly through, and they have the 2x4 rule. If there's something that shows them that there's glass there and it's 2 horizontal or 4 vertical, they'll know that there is something in their way and not fly into it. There is a lead pilot credit. It's 55 bird collision difference. And in that, they have the results of these types of glass. So they will have, like, if you have a brick or stone or wood, obviously the threat factor is 0 because the birds don't fly into it. But if you look at mirrored glass, single pane or insulated, it's 100%, or completely clear glass, it's 100%. They see that as a habitat if it's reflective, or they see that as just not there if it's clear glass. So what are different what are different government and corporate campuses doing about it? In government, different cities and states have bird safe design or light out ordinances and guidelines, and they're starting to come out in other cities as well. And corporate campuses, I'll give you some examples of corporate examples. San Francisco and Oakland passed bird-safe building design ordinances based on the brochure that I left on your table. They're almost the same as that. And the recommendations are being enforced as an ordinance. Sunnyvale earlier this year adopted bird-safe design guidelines, and those are intended to be implemented over about a year to see whether they want to actually have an ordinance later or not. So next year, Sunnyvale will be revisiting to see if they want to turn the guidelines into an ordinance. San Jose today, I published an opinion paper in the Mercury News. And the city of San Jose is already moving forward. The staff is studying whether to move forward with an ordinance or guidelines. And the city Environment and Transportation Committee will be studying the results of this process in September and making recommendations for whether to move forward with an ordinance or guidelines. And so that's what cities are doing in this area. In terms of what campuses are doing, they're looking at the wider bird-friendly campus designs and integration of the campus with nature, and they want to have birds there. So creating habitats for the birds is one of the things that is important. Birds should have shelter and food and trees and water. The night lights, like I mentioned before, it's a night light off programs, and then they have architectural principles for the buildings, which use less glass, visual cues, no reflective glass, no transparent walkways, things like that, and definitely consider interactions with landscape, because often if you have a very reflective glass and a tree next to it, then the bird will fly into it. So this is the Facebook campus planned by Frank Gehry. The initial plan called for 3 big glass buildings and a parking garage. After they've discussed the plans with environmental groups, they went back home, did a lot of thinking, and came back with a 10-acre building, just one big room for the developers, and a roof garden for birds. It's actually designed to be a migratory stopover for passerines. And all the glass is fritted. It has, I'll show you in a minute, and they have design features like no real transparent corners, no walkways that are transparent, things like that. This is the planned Mountain View Intuit campus. Again, there is probably too much glass here, but they also have some design features, and it's all fritted glass, all of it. It added about 0.5% or 0.2% to the cost of the buildings, as far as I know. I mean, that's what they told me, but I don't have too much detail. So this is a building also planned for some roof gardens for birds, but a lot of fritted glass to warn the birds. This is a frit with, so fritted glass has ceramic something embedded in it. These are dots. I think Facebook uses dots. The Intuit campus uses fritted lines so that birds can see, and it's less than the 2x4 rule, so the birds can see it. There's different kinds of frit. There's a lot of different types, and if you just put fritted glass in Google, you'll find a lot of different solutions. This is Vassar College in New York. They use UV glass. It's more expensive, but it's quite amazing. The birds can see this glass, but people don't. So you see through this. Okay, I'll just give you one. This is the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. They found a relatively inexpensive solution, which is those streaming lines coming down there. They had some problems before that. So, you know, just this is a little bird that was unfortunate enough to think it can fly into that tree. And I think I'll just stop here.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any members of the public here to speak on this item? I don't have any speaker cards at this time, but I'll open the public comment period. That's fine. That's fine. I'm sure we'll have questions for you. Seeing no one here to speak on the item, I'll close the public hearing, and let's begin with Board Member Liu.
Great. So, thank you for the presentation. I know I know that you've been speaking at council meetings and stuff, and I've heard your presentations there. I was wondering if you've reviewed Palo Alto's guidelines, and if whether you think we should just go like directly to an ordinance, or if you think that doing what Sunnyvale is doing, which is using a design guidelines first, and then going to a ordinance. And I would just say, like, we have guidelines for different parts of the city, but we don't necessarily have one set of guidelines for all of the different
I think
zones.
for Palo Alto, different cities, I would recommend different things. And I think in Palo Alto, I would actually recommend an ordinance.
I think that makes sense too, in my mind. And I was wondering if there's a difference in, in Palo Alto, we have very different types of districts. I mean, like the research park is completely different than the Baylands versus downtown. And are the various ordinances that have been used in like San Francisco and Oakland, are they tailored to that, or is it standard for all zoning areas?
So San Francisco and Oakland started with different ways to treat areas that are close to open space and water versus areas that are more inside the city. I think the reason for that was they thought they can get it easier, not because they thought there was more risk to the birds there than elsewhere. And I showed you the pictures in downtown San Jose, and if you read my op-ed, the motivation for a lot of this in San Jose is that one of their falcons crashed into a window on City Hall. So the birds will crash into windows anywhere. And I think that we really need to think about it in Palo Alto, especially. We have so many trees. We have such a beautiful forest. We have so many gardens. People, even downtown, we have a lot of greenery. So I think in Palo Alto, the risk is pretty high anywhere.
I have bird strikes on my one-story house, and I know that bird print that you had on the window. I have that on my house
Do you?
too. Yes, and I don't like cleaning those.
Thank you.
And then in like this document, are there I think you showed one chart with the reflective glass, and is there anything more specific? Because we don't actually have any. I don't think we have any regulations on reflectivity of glass, and I think we ought to. But it's just something that's, I mean, it's very technical.
Yes.
The glass and the reflectivity and the color. So it seems unusual, like just because we don't have it on any of our other recommendations. But I think it's important. I think it's very important.
The lead pilot 55 has a table that lists a lot of the different types of glass and how reflective or how transparent it can be. And they are actually, the American Bird Conservancy has been doing more studies, and they're actually updating it right now. I think 15% reflectivity, if you go over that, you get a penalty in the new design guidelines. I'll be happy to send this to you as soon as the new one is published. The existing one is online, but the new one is going to probably be finished in a couple of months.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Board Member Mullen-Pritchard.
Thank you for bringing this forward. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart. When I'm not working as an architect, I'm busy rescuing pigeons and doves. So, love birds. And this is something I think a lot of people just don't know about at all. And I'm really glad you brought it forward, and I urge staff to figure out a way to get this written into an ordinance. I think the way the city of Palo Alto's zoning is set up as guidelines, it would be hard to write a guideline that would be overarching and hit every single building perhaps that was the wrong choice of words, but but the ordinance really, it does need to also involve residences and every one of the districts. And thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Board Member Guyer.
I don't have anything at this point.
All right, I want to just ask, as I was quickly leafing through the booklet here, I noticed that the City of San Francisco has enacted, through its planning department, some objective standards that are clearly listed on a website address that they've got in there. It's on page 35 of this booklet that you handed us. Is that something that we might
Just copy that.
incorporate, or are you familiar enough with that you'd make a recommendation that we should start to utilize those standards, or is that is the requirement in San Francisco different enough from Palo Alto that they're not consistent or correct for us?
I would like Palo Alto to develop something a little different. We don't have a lot of tall buildings the way that they do. We don't have a lot of the same kind of issues. When Sunnyvale looked at it, they developed different guidelines than these. And they did develop the guidelines citywide rather than only for the areas near parks. They have more stringent guidelines for areas near open space and park, but they do have some that would be applicable anywhere. So I think there is more information now than there was when this was published about 3-4 years ago. And it would be good to start implementing this right away as a starting point before anything else is developed. But I think it would be good to study this issue a little more for Palo Alto specifically.
Great. Well, I grew up way up in the hills here, way up Page Mill Road, and remember, lots of birds hitting the windows in my house as a child. Was part of the design team for the Jewish Community Center, Toby Cratt Campus for Jewish Life. And as a component of that project, we've got a whole series of separate buildings that are connected by glass bridges. And we elected to frit the glass on all of those bridges. Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been a single bird strike. I've asked about that, and I think that it's clear that that can be very successful.
Yeah.
And am hopeful that other architects will include an understanding of this in their design. As a board, it's not our role to tell people how they have to design their projects, but we can certainly encourage them towards certain ideas or concepts, and I'm hopeful that as we go forward we'll do that. But do want to encourage you to continue on with your emphasis on this, and to work with the City Council and our staff to bring whatever standards to the regulations, whatever recommendations are appropriate for this. Anyone else have any further comments? Board Member Liu.
So I guess this may be a question for staff or Amy. So this is if we're talking about a zoning change, then this would need to go to the PTC, correct? So I was just wondering if your thoughts on this.
Correct. Hopefully this is on. Anytime we modify our zoning code, Title 18 of the Palo Alto Municipal Code, we need to go to the Planning and Transportation Commission first. Well, we could come to the ARB with, a draft ordinance, but certainly we need to be directed to prepare the ordinance and put that in our work plan, first, and then we could visit with the ARB to review the standards or ideas there. And then we'd go to the Planning Commission and then the Council. As far as guidelines and what we advise applicants, I think there is a possibility for the ARB to, as we've done in the past, provide guidelines on lighting. We've done, in the past we've done ARB recommendations and just used them with applicants on matters such as lighting. I think this could be another matter where we could start sooner rather than wait for an ordinance.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? No. Jenny, thank you very much for your time today and for the fantastic presentation. Really appreciate the information you brought forward to us and elevating all of our understanding of the concerns surrounding this and what we can do to help minimize the dangers for the birds in our area.
Thank you very much.
All right, so as I've mentioned before, the public hearing for 385 Sherman Avenue has been continued to the regular meeting of July 17th, 2014, and so we'll look forward to hearing that item at that point. Are there any board or staff announcements, updates, reports, or comments to be made today?
I'm sorry, could you just make sure that there's no one here on 385? There's a number of folks here, so make sure.
I asked to just make, again, is there anyone here for 385? It doesn't look like there is. I think we're fine with that. Thank you. So again, back to board member staff announcements, updates, reports, comments.
So I attended the council meeting, and there were 2 items on there. One was the Mayfield housing project on the California site, which was appealed by by Fred Bowen, and then the other item was Roxy Raps project on Hamilton. Is it 261 Hamilton? Is that the right? 261 Hamilton, which went to the council for, well, I think 2 things. One was the interpretation of the ordinance, and then also the change from a proposed change from Category 3 to Category 2, right, a historic designation.
We forwarded, rather than having Director Gittleman make a decision on the project, the ARB application, we forwarded that to the council.
Yeah.
Along with the category change.
Yeah. And so on the Mayfield housing site, the council made they asked for some changes to the subdivision plans, but not all of the requests by the College Terrace Neighborhood Association. And then on 261 Hamilton, they recommended the more stringent interpretation of the buildable area, and they've continued the project at the applicant's request to see what might come back and how it might come back. Yeah. Great. Yes. Great.
Buildable area was a term that staff had used with respect to staff's interpretation of building envelope. So what the council in effect did by this case was to say the building envelope is the building that exists.
Right. Right, and not like setback daylight plane envelope. Right.
Could be built under the height and setback of the plane standards.
All right, anything else at this point? No. All right, with that, we will adjourn this meeting. There are 2 items for subcommittee today, 101 Lytton and 668 Ramona, and I think Board Member Malone Pritchard and Board Member Guyer will be present for the subcommittee. Thank you all for your time today.